So free speech is a rare thing in the history of humanity, and it is always under attack. But what's so special about free speech anyway? The critics point out that it should have limits. You can't engage in libel, slander, child pornography, or yelling fire in a crowded theater just for kicks. And the critics are correct. Free speech should have limits, and I'll address how we should draw those in the next video in this series. First, though, let's get clear on why free speech is valuable. And valuable not just as a political right that may or may not be protected by some government, but why free speech is valuable as a pre-political process. Once we have that down, we can look at how we should draw the limits. But first we have to understand the value of it. So number one, the first reason free speech is valuable is because it's necessary to discover truth. If we are not free to express and test alternative hypotheses, our minds and society stagnate and we no longer discover new truths. For example, if scientists are not free to explore alternative hypotheses about climate change, racism, gender, the Earth's age, religion, homosexuality, IQ, entheogenic drugs, the effects of transitioning on young people. If scientists are not allowed to explore these controversial topics, then science will stagnate in those areas, as it has in some of those areas. The bottom line is we need free speech and thought to deepen our opinions, to advance knowledge in science and technology in all areas of inquiry. So let me make this clear. I don't want legislators or big tech companies tell me what is and is not true. Science does not give the definite conclusions they think. Science is simply the open-ended process of observing, hypothesizing, and testing. And history shows many examples of scientific dogmas falling by the wayside. All right, number two. The second reason free speech is valuable is because there's no critical or good thinking without free speech. Again, most people think of free speech as the political right to speak truth to power, but it's more important than that. It's a pre-political process necessary for good thinking. So here's an example. When I think about an issue like abortion, I slow down, I pretend I am defending the side I disagree with. There's an inner dialogue in which one voice in my head gives an argument and the other voice replies with criticisms of that argument. And I add to this inner dialogue with research. And all of this activity, this splitting up the self, imagining opposing views, research, sleeping on it, reconsidering it the next day, all of this is hard work hampered by my confirmation biases, evil intentions, and other personal limitations. It's also hampered because of social media algorithms, but we won't go there. The bottom line is it's hard work to consider all major counter-arguments. It's hard work to think well. But fortunately, I can present my arguments in public arenas where free speech is encouraged and protected. You can then help me think by sharing your insights about my arguments. And this feedback can help me overcome my blind spots, biases, and other limitations. You may be doing this now as you listen to and add comments to this video. So in short, thinking is a social activity in which I need your feedback. I need your critical evaluation to think well. Free speech protects that feedback and so can help every person think better. Again, to become more intelligent, I need to hear people challenge my ideas on climate change, on slavery, on transgender issues, all those controversial issues, right? Now, I know many of you out there want to impose your true beliefs upon me, your beliefs about racism, sexism, the wrongness of genocide, climate change, the proper way to raise kids, the dress that's clearly blue and black, and so on. You want to impose your true beliefs and opinions upon me to make the world a better place, I know. But notice that if true and good beliefs are imposed upon me, they don't take root. New powers can easily impose a different belief on me because I never understood any deep reasons for the first imposed belief. That is, I cannot discover the deeper reasons for why a true belief is true if it's not allowed to clash with false beliefs. That's from John Stuart Mill. I can't understand the deeper reasons for why a true belief is true if it's not allowed to clash with false beliefs. Nor can I see the partial truths and partial falsehoods within all views and opposing views. So the bottom line is I simply cannot think well when you impose your beliefs on me. So to summarize the second reason, good thinking is a social activity supported by free speech. We need to encounter contrary beliefs, opinions, and arguments to deepen our beliefs, opinions, and arguments. And when you refrain from speaking because you fear being canceled, losing your job, being unfriended, losing family relationships, and so on, which I completely understand because I refrain from speaking for some of those reasons throughout my life. But when you do that, you aren't just losing your ability to express yourself. You're losing your ability to think well. All right, the third reason free speech is important is that many virtues depend on free speech. So consider open-mindedness and tolerance. Note that open-minded means you fairly consider all views before accepting or rejecting them. It doesn't mean you're just accepting all views, right? And tolerance is putting up with ideas you disagree with. It takes no tolerance to put up with ideas you agree with. That's easy. It takes tolerance to put up with ideas you disagree with. That's why it's a virtue. It's kind of hard. So here's the bottom line. How can you be tolerant if you don't have free speech and so you cannot hear the views that you disagree with? And how can you be open-minded and fairly consider all views if you don't even allow them to express their views? Without free speech, we will have an intolerant and closed-minded society. So in short, the third reason, the processes of free speech and thought are the soil from which many virtues flow, including the virtues of open-mindedness and tolerance. All right, the fourth reason. The fourth reason free speech is valuable is because it empowers the most vulnerable persons and groups. It empowers oppressed individuals and minority groups, as well as those with unpopular opinions. Now, this reason is especially interesting because many people who support hate speech laws and the limitations of free speech implied by hate speech laws, many people who support hate speech laws do so because they believe they are protecting the weakest, the oppressed, and those in the minority. And their heart seems to be in the right place. But as I'll argue in later videos in this free speech series, I believe history shows that these hate speech laws usually backfire and they harm those they're created to protect. For now, I just encourage you to look at Martin Luther King Jr., his defense and appeal to free speech in his I've Been to the Mountaintop speech. It's a great defense of free speech. And it also shows how minority groups use free speech to get their rights and to get justice, to get power. John Lewis was an American statesman and civil rights leader who recently died in 2020. And he said, without robust freedom of speech and dissent, the civil rights movement would have been a bird without wings. So on a personal level, notice too that the domestic abuser doesn't want the abused to freely associate with others. Even he understands the value of free speech and how it, erodes on his control, into his control over the abused. So there's much more to say in debate, but the main point is that the civil rights movement is just one of many examples for why free speech should be protected. Free speech empowers individuals regardless of their group membership. And while people use their free speech to bully and hurt others, oppressed people and those with minority opinions also use free speech to be heard, validated, and protected. While free speech should have limits that we'll explore later, we must be careful to make those limits, the criteria by which we limit, right? We must make that clear and as fair as possible. The well-being of everyone depends on it, especially individuals in minority groups or those who hold unpopular opinions. All right, the fifth reason free speech is valuable is rarely identified. Free speech is necessary for love. If I'm not free to share my true thoughts with my wife, then my growth and consequently our growth will stagnate. Deep relationships arise when you can speak and develop freely, not when you feel you must agree with every idea of your so-called friend. So if I am to develop, I need freedom to think and speak my thoughts. And again, my thoughts may be immature, incorrect, or even harmful in some way, but I need to speak them and hear your response to grow into a truer and more mature person. I need a space in which my ideas will be heard and challenged so I can actualize my potential, integrate my subconscious, and grow in truth and love. Free speech is needed to grow. So in my mind, a safe space is not where I'm completely accepted all of my ideas. A safe space is where loving people can separate me from my ideas, not just accept my ideas, right? You could think of it like this. A real friend does not love you because of your ideas. A real friend loves you even when your ideas change. And a real friend is not afraid to discuss controversial ideas with you because they're mature and loving enough to separate you from your ideas. Consider this too. When you research former neo-Nazis, you'll find that many of them changed not because they encountered Twitter mobs or censors. Indeed, there are many cases in which censorship actually caused these neo-Nazis to dig into their beliefs, to hold them more strongly. Okay, so these former neo-Nazis didn't change because of censors or mobs. They changed because they encountered loving people who separated them from their ideas while also challenging their ideas in loving ways. They change in freedom. And if you just impose change on them, it's never very deep. Watch your back. Number 6. The sixth reason free speech is a valuable process involves humility and confidence. So we need free speech to remain humble in our ideas, but we also need free speech to be confident in our ideas. Now, humility arises when you constantly test your ideas in a free public arena. You come to understand the strengths and weaknesses of your idea. You understand that some ideas are half true or half false, and that it's complex. You come to realize that you are not the arbiter of truth and justice, but other people, especially those who disagree with you, can help you develop your ideas. So we have humility here arising in freedom. And it's like a boxer. You're very confident, and you have this plan until you get punched in the face, right? Then you develop a little humility. Now, confidence, too, arises when some ideas survive or emerge from the test in a free public arena. In short, the virtues of both humility and self-confidence that arise from testing ideas, they depend on free speech. Now, I know at this point, many critics may say, but racism and hatred are just wrong. And I agree with that. Racism and hatred are wrong, but we don't want to limit freedom of speech and thought so much that people don't understand the deeper reasons for why racism, slavery, genital mutilation, child rape, and other wrongs are wrong. So this brings me to a subtle point about the importance of free speech, moral depth. So the seventh reason free speech is valuable is because it produces a moral depth that just is not possible without it. So imagine a child asks you why cheating is wrong, and one parent says, "Shut up and obey, you little so-and-so." Now the second parent discusses and helps him, the child, discover deeper moral truths. You can see my video called Why Cheating is Wrong if you need help with that. Okay, let's assume the child is over 8 years old, right? The age of decision. Now, the second parent encourages free speech, and so the child develops a deeper understanding and motivation to be moral. We need freedom of speech to more deeply understand morality, which strengthens our resolve to be moral. You know, in my teaching of ethics, many people have shallow views of morality and why evils like slavery, child rape, and honor killings are wrong. Now, one reason they're shallow is because they grew up in censored environments. That is, their moral beliefs are shallow because they have never sparred with false beliefs, with opposing beliefs that might be half true, half false, or entirely false, or what have you. So if you want to strengthen your moral belief that slavery is wrong, you should study all the pro-slavery arguments you can find for why it's right. You know, superficial understandings for why slavery is wrong are dangerous, and they arise in censored environments, environments in which people were protected from offensive arguments for slavery. They don't understand the old scientific and religious arguments for and against slavery that stretch back thousands of years, and so they don't deeply understand the intelligent replies against those arguments. You know, if shouting, mob disapproval, legislation, power plays, and other authoritarian measures are what makes slavery wrong, then slavery could suddenly become good if the power shifts. The shouting, the mob disapproval, the legislation, the power plays, right? So my position is that only free speech can nurture the development of people who not only live deeply moral lives, but also understand the deeper reasons for why evils are evil, slavery, child rape, and so on. Only this deeper understanding can give a more rational defense of, say, human rights, which, by the way, the government of China denies. They say it's a Western idea. There's no rights. Okay. Without free speech, moral opinions are imposed opinions, and people no longer experience the deeper reasons and motivations to be moral. Number 8, humor, comedy, and free speech. You know, if there's a right to not be offended, then you cannot have comedy. That's the bottom line. And most comedians support free speech because they enjoy laughing. And some of their jokes are tasteless, but many people claim they are funny because they present an unexpected truth, a new perspective, a humorous caricature, or they just find them funny for some unknown reason. The best scenes in life often seem just beyond the reach of reason. Who am I to say that they're tasteless and should be censored? Now, the censor may think it's wrong to make stereotypical jokes about these groups, but the censor seems to be mistaken when so many people in these groups laugh at the jokes about themselves. Angels fly because they take themselves lightly. You may think they should not laugh at themselves in that way, but they disagree. Why do you think you know better than them? And have you noticed how strange it is to hear a joke from Stalin, Hitler, or Putin? Well, you better laugh. And is that really laughter? So, to conclude this section, some forms of laughter seem to be beyond the reach of the censor, the authoritarian personality, some people. The most and best laughter arises where free speech is encouraged, or at least tolerated. And while some people will be offended and some comedians will spew hatred, I believe the benefits of these types of laughter that can arise only in freedom outweigh the perceived harms. So let's conclude. Free speech is not simply a political right that may or may not be protected by some government. Very rare that it is. It's a process that every human needs to grow. Like a hammer, it's very useful, even though it has limits, since not everything's a nail. Now, it's a process that you need to develop the virtues of open-mindedness, tolerance, love, critical thinking, humor, and truth. It's not simply a tool of the powerful, but the most important tool of the oppressed. The freedom to speak what you believe and be challenged leads to individual growth, humility, and laughter. So we should understand some of these points before seeking to limit it. Okay, so those are just some of the reasons for why free speech is important, not just as a political right, but as a pre-political process needed to grow, to flourish. And perhaps you can think of other reasons. Now, what's next? In the next few videos, we need to explore some criticisms against free speech. We need to explore the criteria by which to limit it, and the criteria by which we should not limit free speech. Most importantly, we need to look at actual cases around the world involving free speech. To see how this plays out in the real world. There's nothing like case studies to drive these points home. And I leave you with these famous lines on the screen, which also supports the idea that allowing free speech, even for deplorable ideas, allowing that is in your long-term self-interest. Thank you.